Ceann Comhairle, I had hoped to move a reasoned amendment at this stage to delay the second reading of this bill for 30 days because I believe it is being rushed. It's being rushed because we are being asked to consider legislation here without all of the relevant information being disclosed to us. Remember that the Commission of Inquiry was established by the Houses of the Oireachtas, not by the Minister, not by the Government, but by the Houses of the Oireachtas. And the reports should have been published and made available to this House here before we considered this legislation. And in particular, the 6th interim report, which I know Deputy Connolly will talk about later, which specifically raises the issues that are before us here today in terms of the transfer of records to the Minister. And yet we are being asked now to consider this legislation without having access to that information that was supposed to have been presented to us, which your predecessor on the 16th of February last, Minister Zappone, said that she intends to publish that interim report as soon as practicable. We're being asked now to consider this legislation without that relevant information being provided to us, and that is wrong. It is wrong that we've been asked to consider that. And I had drafted a considered amendment here that it would be delayed for 1 month, that the Commission report, the final report, would not be published until the 30th of November. And I received the support of Deputy Connolly, Deputy Berry, Deputy Canny, Deputy Fitzpatrick, Deputy Grealish, Deputy Lowry, Deputy Murphy, Deputy Shanahan, Deputy Pringle and Deputy Collins, that report would be made available to us before we would consider committee stage of this bill. The reason that I believe it is imperative to do that is you, Minister, will not answer me as to what records are being held under Article 1, subsection 5 of the Terms of Reference of the Commission in relation to the vaccine trials. This is an issue that I have consistently raised here in this House for the last 20 years, and I have yet to get clear answers in relation to it. This is an issue that was referred to the Lafoy Commission, but because of a legal challenge was not considered by the Lafoy Commission. And in an act of nothing short of criminal negligence, in 2012, the records that were collated by the Lafoy Commission were handed back to the original sources. And I asked here, when this legislation and this commission was being established in 2015, if those records could be and would be acquired again. And the then Minister, James Riley, assured me that that can and would be able to happen. But since that date, I have received no information as a member of this House as to what consideration, what records were collated, and now we're being told that even if those records are got back from the various orders again, that we won't be able to see those for the next 30 years. Now, the reality is that these children in these institutions were used as lab rats. They were the guinea pigs for vaccine trials. And it is unbelievable to think that the normal standard vaccine at the time, the 3-in-1 whooping cough vaccine, was given to the general population. But the trial vaccine was given to the children in the institutions because they didn't have to worry about the issue of consent. Now, the state provided consent in relation to that because some of these trials were actually published in scientific papers. Now, there is no way that these trials were ethical where all of the guinea pigs were the children within the institutions. And while some of these trials were supposed to take place in 1973 for a 2-year period, and consent was given by the National Drugs Advisory Board at the time, the trials in fact went on, that particular trial went on into 1976. And from digging around, we know that there was trials in the late 60s, and into the 70s. There's some going back to the 1930s. But none of us know when these trials actually finished. And the children that were involved, those adults today, have a right to know what concoction they received, why they were involved in trials, why some of those children were involved not in one trial, not in 2 trials, not in 3 trials, but 4 separate trials. And no records are available because the records were handed back to the religious orders back in 2012, and we haven't heard anything since. And now we're being told that even when those records do come back, that they're going to be locked in a safe for the next 30 years. It's not much point, 60, 70 years after these babies were used as guinea pigs, some of them maybe with adverse medical conditions as a result of being used in those trials, that they'll then get access to those records. Their children and their grandchildren can find out why their grandparent had a particular chronic illness because they were used as guinea pigs. The state colluded in relation to that. The religious orders were involved in it, and the Wellcome company who were involved in that at the time. And I believe that it is a scandal that those particular records were handed back by the state. I argued at the time in 2012 that they shouldn't be handed back, but sadly it fell on deaf ears. And you know, Minister, I've absolutely no doubt about it, of your sincerity, or Deputy Cleary's sincerity here. And I know that you want to do the right thing. But these records won't be available for 30 years. You know that, and I know that. You also know that there is a culture of non-disclosure there, because if there wasn't, those records would not have been handed back in 2012, and measures that you are now taking would have been taken at that stage. Don't rush this legislation. Give us the chance to consider it properly. Thank you.